We just have not gotten a definite dollar amount, a distribution. We're hearing that it will be based on Title I and some governor priorities. So I've heard more than 1.5 for a district about Sumter's size. So that could help offset some of the state revenues. In 2008, when we went through the recession, the state stabilization funds at the time, or the ARA funds, absolutely helped schools make it through that recession. And we continued to save, and we called it the funding cliff back then. So,
this is definitely just a wait and see what happens. Nobody knows.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's correct. And it's a lot easier, quite frankly, to tighten our belts a little bit now than after the school year begins next year and contracts are signed and people are employed. And so we're trying to be frugal and all here as we go.
Okay, next screen, Nash. Yeah. So on our first calc, we said 1.7 million more in funds. Remember that there are categoricals, and so the teacher's salary increase, we don't know that. We hope it will be there, or it might not, but that is a categorical that we would take to bargaining, and we would disperse the salary increase. If I don't think the 47.5 ended up being the number, but whatever, I think that was to try to make it a priority to 47.5. They also had the 85 increase in FTE, 85 students. Holding that aside, assuming we are not sure we would grow that much, that would be 359,000 for growth. The miscellaneous categoricals and restricted funds that declined, like the digital allocation and those, would be 203. And the big whammy hitter that isn't going to change from everything I'm hearing is the mandatory requirement increase to districts of 571,000. I calculated that on current staffing because, you know, I'm working on the budget and current, and Ms. Moffitt's working on staffing, so that will decrease now that we've made it through most of our staffing, and Ms. Moffitt will show that later. So I believe we'll get that retirement increase down as we look at staffing. But if we employed the current people, it would be 571,000. And then DOE, I believe, has inflated our FTE, our weighted FTE. We will just have to wait and see as we receive students, but there's 426,000 that I worry is not weighted as high as they think. So I would see the new funds as 197,000. Oh, and that's with a good budget, so. The next one is our millage rates. The column to the left is our current millage, our 14.2 billion of tax value. They're saying 15.4 next year of tax value. That's a number that, from the indications we've been getting, is not inflated. But like I said, until we hear from Mr. Hooten, we won't know for sure. Then you see our required local effort is currently 3.17. The green column would be our rollback estimating, and then the right column would be the most the board could levy. We always, in the discretionary, use the most of 0.748, and we adjust the capital because that's more restrictive. The discretionary you could use in general fund and capital if you'd like. And so the green column would have the 45.5 million in required local effort, the discretionary of 11 million. Both sides, both the green and the orange are the same, or the right. And it would be the capital that you would possibly of 1.34 to meet rollback, and 1.5 would be the highest you could levy. So you're between 20 million and 22 million for capital. Now, if the state lowers the general fund, the base student allocation, that will affect your required local effort, and it will decrease the required local effort and probably move more into capital. My fear is that the state will adjust revenues so high because this are low because of stimulus and things that your required local effort could go low, very low, and we're still at 90%, so it gets capped, and that's why it would be low. And then the following year, when you try to recover, it could look like required local effort could go up. I don't want to say a whole mil, but it could go up a lot if there's a recovery. So we'll have to watch what this will do to our millage rates as we go through the decrease and recovery. It could make it fluctuate and be something that we're going to have to be in top of to explain to our stakeholders.
There's also one other item the board just needs to be aware of. In 2008 and 9, when the economy really had we went into a deep recession, the legislature basically took away 2 mills that was used for capital and lowered that down to 1.5 mills as the cap that we could levy for capital, and use that half mil that they took away from capital and put it into the required local effort. So that's kind of a playbook they have used in the past. If that happens, then that would also have an impact on that 1.5 and the dollar amount that you potentially see there.
Absolutely correct.
Mrs.
Any
Smith?
questions on
Yes, Sally has a question.
Okay.
Just really, if I'm reading this correctly, for 2019-20, our total millage rate was 5.42.
Correct.
Right? And we did the 1.50 for the capital outlay.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you have here, if we were to do the 1.5 on capital outlay, then our millage rate would be 5.31.
It would still be.
That's a reduction from what we did in 1920. So to the stakeholders, it would be looking like we reduced the taxes.
Yes, but to meet the definition of rollback, you're bringing in approximately the same revenue except for construction in progress. And so it has to do with the revenue brought in, not the millage rate. And so to do the calculation to meet rollback, it would be the 5.16. If we did anything higher, I agree with you, the millage rate would still go down, but we would be, to meet trim requirements, we would have to advertise, as we did this past year, but we'd have to advertise a tax increase. And we did a good job, I think, of explaining it, put our little arrow and explained how it was not really a tax increase, but was a tax increase. And so we can look at that if we want to do the same thing, or we want to do rollback or in between or whatever when we get closer. But you're absolutely right. The millage rate would be lower in both the scenarios.
Well, I think you did a great job on explaining it last year, and we could possibly just do that again, but we'll be discussing that later.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then this is one of the screens I keep in there to remind everybody that there's a lot of stuff that the board and the district does that they don't consider in the funding. It's just part of your base student allocation, but we choose to do it, and it's the right thing to do. And first thing is on there is courtesy busing and safety for students, and AVID, one of the best programs I think the district has started. I just think I see so much success in Art in the Capital, and 7 periods gives more student opportunity, but we don't get funded on that 7th period. We do hurricanes and shelters and community service, after school programs, many grants that don't cover the indirect costs, 21st century, 504 students, multi-tiered support systems, and I'm sure there's more that people could can add to the list. But there's no special funding for many of the things we do. Next, Ash. Trying to get, there we go. So remember, we have a
question or
budget.
comment on that, Debbie. I'm sorry.
Sure.
On the last screen.
That's okay.
And I mentioned it before on grants, the indirect costs. Is there any
Mhm.
way when we have a grant coming up that we could somehow get that information so we know? Yes, it's grant money that we're getting, but what is the indirect cost to the
Okay.
district?
Sometimes it's clear, like United Way doesn't cover benefits, so I can absolutely give that. Some of it, I have petitioned the state, if you will. I've brought it up at my finance council meetings a couple times, that a small district like ours is typically a 5% indirect cost rate. And we were that for many years, around 5%. But when they included the charter expenditures into our calculation, it pushed us to a 3%. So we're off about 2% almost on every grant in our indirect cost. And the state understands what I'm talking about, but they can't they have to wait till it's, what do you call it, like an open book with the federal government before they renegotiate the indirect cost rate. Because the charter expenditures really shouldn't be in our calculation, because we don't do anything with their payroll or theirs, but that usually there's economies of scale with indirect cost. And so a county like Orange County might only have 3% because there's economies of scale. The smaller counties all are about 5 to 6%, but because they've included some other expenditures in there, it inflates it. But we can try to work on identifying it.
That's fine. Just if there's some way that explains the percentage as well. But if we know something, that would be nice. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so TRIM stipulates our budget and our budget calendar. I don't believe there have been any waivers or changes to that, but stranger things have happened this year. But assume that in July we will have our workshop. We'll have a proposed budget hearing. We will have a proposed millage. We will set that for advertising. That rate, the millage rate, can always be lower in August and September, but it can never be higher than what's decided in July, or what's advertised in July, let's put it that way. And then we have our tentative budget hearing. We send the amounts to the tax appraiser, and he sends the TRIM notices out to taxpayers. And then on September 8th, we'll adopt our millage rates and final budget. And this screen, I think, came into this budget presentation in 2008, and we have kept it in many, many years. We didn't even have to look to this screen, but we used this screen in 2008 as we set our budget priorities and had to look hard at every program and every expenditure. And so the board had their mission, their core mission, and their strategic goals for ensuring if we had to go through budget reductions. And it was a quality education and a safe environment at affordable cost for all stakeholders while maintaining appropriate fund reserves in an unstable economic climate. Any necessary budget reductions will be based on shared sacrifices or program determinations that maximize the impact on instruction of students and the needs of classrooms and schools. Every effort will be made to accomplish the strategic plan of the district while continuing employment of current, permanent employees, make affordable staffing and other budgetary adjustments to serve the long-term needs of the district. And so as we enter our year of uncertainty, I think this year we will all be looking at our mission and strategic values and ensuring that classrooms are preserved and instruction is preserved and students are not the ones that suffer in our struggle as we move forward. Any comments or questions? I think that's my last slide.
So
Any questions?
I'm
Thank
good.
you for your hard work.
Thank you.
So with no questions, which she covered very well, thank you, Mrs. Smith. We'll go to 97.01, the staffing with Ms. Moffitt with public input. Oh,
And just to
before I go on, is there any public that would like to have input on what we just covered?
And just
Seeing none?
Ms. Norris, just as
Yes.
a point of information, just to remind everybody that no formal action takes place in the workshop. We're
Right.
just going through things now, and any formal action takes place in a regular board meeting.
Right, this is just a workshop letting us know. Thank you. And so Mrs. Moffitt, are you ready? Don't see her or hear her yet. Mr. Trick went to look for her, I think.
It's kind of lonely in that board
there.
room, isn't it, Ms. Norris?
Here I am. I'm
Yes.
here. It took
Okay,
a while.
good.
My unmute wouldn't work.
All right, you're on.
I'm on. Okay, well, to begin with, after listening to Miss Smith's budget, you realize that my task was not a happy one.
Nope.
And also remember this initial, that this is a very fluid document that literally changes as we progress through the year. So this is a starting point, and we're doing it based on our best guess. We are afraid of what the numbers are going to look like after going through the digital process. Some parents might like it and continue. Some parents are, I believe the majority are going to go, please take them back. You've seen all those memes out there in reference to homeschooling or being a teacher at home. But there is a possibility of some kids and parents really enjoying it and not coming back. And that's something that we have to consider. But it is a very fluid document, and this is initial. And I was given the instructions to be frugal. And so you will see that, and I will have the analysis for you at the very end after Ms. Smith, after Ms. Whitman and I are done with our presentations. So let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Not yet.
It's coming. Got it?
No.
Well,
But you do have a hard copy that Marla sent you?
hang
Yeah.
on. We're gonna get it. It's gonna work. Just a minute. Do I share first and then?
No, minimize that one now. Back to your teams. And you didn't select, you don't select down here, you select in this window. Yep, that one.
All right, now do you see it?
No.
Nope, just see you.
Nope, it's coming. Be patient.
There it is.
Hey, okay.
It's a big document.
It's a big document. Okay, this is our initial staffing. Of course, it's April 2020. The first few pages are our definitions, our formulas, and basically there were no changes to this. I just want to point out a few things as things to remember. That we still honor class size when we do this. K3 is 1 to 18, grades 4 to 8 is 1 to 22, and grades 9 to 12 is 1 to 25. We also, as we look, people are always asking what we use for guidance. We use the state average. It was 1 to 485 students. Media and physical ed curriculum is based on availability of funds. There really is no formula for that anymore. And our exceptional student education is really a guideline. And I'm going to try something here and see if it works. It will be a miracle. It worked before. Does that change colors for you? Did your guidelines get yellow?
Yes, yes.
Good, yay. Okay, so I just wanted you to be sure that you know that ESC is a guideline. Everything that is done is through an individual IEP. We have ratios down here, but depending upon those kids, you might have a kid that has a 1 to 3, a 1 to 2, a 1 to 1. And so these are just guidelines. And then Miss Dustin works with the teachers and the staffing specialists to determine what those ratios are. So these are just guidelines, they're not set in stone. Just want to bring that up. There's really no changes here. Nothing changed this year. So I'm skipping through unless you have a question on any of the positions.
And board, we do want to go as slow as we need to go because it's new to all of us. So please don't hesitate to tell us to whoa.
Mrs. Moffett, Sally Moss, question.
Yes, ma'am.
On your page 3, where it says music, one teacher per elementary school based on available funding.
Yes, ma'am.
Can that funding, can it come from grants or does it come from grants?
It was started out of Title I, but right now the board's paying for that. So that is if we had grants that would fund that, the answer would be yes. But we haven't found a grant for that, and the board has always felt that music was important to elementary students, and so that is something that we have kept in there. But that would definitely, if we got to the Miss Purple page that we had in 2008, that was an area that was on the cutting board, chopping block.
Okay.
So yes, if we found a grant that would fund that, or art teachers, either way, that yes, we would pursue that.
Okay.
All right. We have, our pre-K lead positions, our virtual lab positions. We have our computer techs. And then people always ask how custodial hours gets funded or gets calculated. Here is the formula that goes through for a custodial hour. It's not just, I think I'm going to give Wildwood Elementary School 8 people, and I'm going to give South Sumter High School 3 people, or there's a formula that goes by that looks at the number of teachers, number of students, how many rooms, how many the acreage, and so it's a formula that gets calculated. Now we look at roll up. And this is looking at kindergarten, and as a 5-year average that we do every year. So Bushnell looks like if you rolled everybody up and everybody stayed, and we had 116 kindergartners, that they have 714 students. But this is our starting point for every school. We take the 5th graders from Bushnell and Webster and Lake Pan, and they become the 6th graders at South Sumter Middle School. We take the 5th graders from Wildwood Elementary School, and they become the 6th grade at Wildwood Middle High School. the number of 8th graders that were at South Sumter Middle School, they become these freshmen at South Sumter High School. So those are actual bodies that were here in January. It was January 16th when I pulled these numbers. Oh, and it's sideways. Okay. Well, this is, y'all have a paper copy, or y'all can flip your machine around. I'm not sure.
We do have a paper copy.
This is the first page. We look at a 2-year growth model. And so we look at the projected roll up like I just showed you. And let's page 8. What happened to page? Well, Marla? Here it is backwards. Okay. We take the roll up from 2 years ago, and we look at how we staffed it. And then we actually look at the enrollment there in January, and we see what the difference is. And then we calculate whether the school met that or not. And you can see that, for instance, Wildwood Middle High School had a 2.95 growth that year. Okay, and let's see what school that one is. That was Lake Panasoffkee had a 4.55% growth that year. That was 2 years ago. Then last year we take the same thing. We look at the 1920 roll up. We look at how they were staffed. We look at their actual enrollment, calculate the difference, and look at that growth. And again, you'll see that Wildwood Middle High School showed an 8.41% growth last year, which was awesome. You'll see that our other schools showed a decrease except for, let me get back over here, Bushnell Elementary School. They showed a little bit of an increase of 2.15%. So Bushnell has been growing over a little bit the last couple of years, and then so has Wildwood Middle High School. So then I take this year's roll up that I just showed you, that 5501. I apply that growth, that 2-year average, and that's the adjustments that's made to the roll up number. And this is the staffing projection. So, for instance, South Sumter High School is 1,063.38, so they're going to be staffed at 1,063. Webster Elementary School, sorry, I'm rolling. I had to say it the other way. Webster Elementary School was 601.51 at 602. So I do that for every school, and that is how we come up with our staffing number through this 2-year average. And then you can look down here and see that last year we staffed at the 5447, and this year is 5470. So we're showing a little bit of a growth, but not as much as what the state's projecting. Any questions on the process?
No.
Okay. All right, let me get back down here. All right, so our first school, Bushnell Elementary School. We plug in our K3 numbers. We multiply that 2-year average, and it shows, remember it showed a growth, so it shows that they're going to have 9 more kids in K3. We take out the self-contained ESE because we provide teachers for that. And I put over here the side because they have a large population of pre-K, just for informational purposes. We divide by the 18, and she should have 26 and a half K3 teachers. 4th and 5th grade, the same thing, but they're at a different average, or different, they're at 1 to 22, so she should have 10 4 or 5 teachers. So that adds up to 36.84. Now, my directions, because of the funding issue, was to round down. If you'll see that in the yellow, that Bushnell's roll up was 714. Their staffing plan is 727 because they showed a growth. And if you just look at February, I looked at their February FTE, they were at 710. So I just wanted to show you comparisons of numbers that it's pretty close to where they were in February. So last year they had 34 classroom teachers from up here, and this year they're actually gaining 2 because they're showing growth. Now, because they're showing growth, that's great, but we're also worried about everything that's going on with the economy and if people have moved because they couldn't find jobs. We did put we always usually start out with a class size on hold. Our class size, we put hers on hold because my directions were that nobody will have more units than they did last year because of the funding. We can't fund more than what we had last year based on the numbers we're getting from DOE. So I've got her class size unit on hold. And then that was the only, so they got 2 basics. If you look at the beige box, they added 2 basics. And they have less on class size because what happens is during the school year, we had to add a unit for class size. So that 1 unit is up here now. So they earned it at the top. This happens down in the year. So now that she's earned that one, I take this one away. And then I have the 1 class size on hold. So she's not losing or gaining. She's going to maintain, and then we're going to look at numbers when the kids actually arrive. That's on the teacher side. On the support side, we're dropping down pre-K. Unfortunately, our VPK is not paying for itself. We're hoping for a raise to this funding because it has not been raised in years. The funds have not increased, and we're going to go. We believe in the red about $20-some thousand. So we have cut. This is one of the schools that have 4 classrooms. We've cut one of those, and then let's see. We added an ESC unit, ESC para, a half a para. And we took away a classroom para because the services were needed in ESC versus in the classroom. So she lost 2 non-instructs, but they were mainly pre-K. Any questions on Bushnell Elementary School? And with my screen being full screen, I can't see you. So unless you.
Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none.
Well, I got more to go.
Oh, we're not.
That's just 1 school.
1 school, yep.
All right, Lake Pan. Again, if you look with the formula is the same. When you go down, last year Lake Pan had 29 teachers. It shows 26.88. Again, I had to round down to 26. If you look at February's numbers at 525 and what I'm staffing at 523, you can see that it's very close. They are getting a class size unit because we have added a special unit on that campus. And so that unit is above and beyond what, because they're taking kids from other schools. So we add a unit there because we as a district have done that. And so the loss to her is of 2 classes. She lost 3 basics, but we added one of them back for that classroom.
And what is will you explain the special class?
It is a K2, a K3 classroom where we have some gen ed children that are experiencing some behavior issues. And so this is a program that we started last year where we try to put these kids in a small teacher student ratio and using some behavior techniques, and that we are trying to intervene, be proactive, and get some of the behaviors under control before they go through. Some of it is they haven't been in school or they've had some trauma in their life. And so we're trying to be proactive and catch them early and trying to help them with the proper ways to behave in class in a social setting. There has been some success. There's been kids in that classroom that have been able to go back out into the mainstream. Miss Winnie Sarverskool is the teacher in that classroom, and she's doing a very good job. So we have seen success, and that's the reason why we're keeping it. Last year was the first year.
And you said they're coming from other schools?
Yes.
To school by bus or?
Yes, if we put them there, we bus them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's kind of like a spa, but not really. But because we place them there, then we bus them there.
What other schools do they come from?
Webster and Wildwood Elementary School, and I think Bushville sent one. I think there's one from each one of the schools, and then Lake Pan had one or two.
Okay.
So it's served the whole district.
Good. I think that's great.
Well, it's not an easy.
To help them get back on track.
Yeah,
or get on track if they've never been on.
It's not an easy classroom, but they're doing a good job with it.
Right. Good.
And so they have a lab manager that is retiring, and we had pretty much done away with all lab managers. And so due to attrition, we're not replacing them. So this one is retiring. In fact, she already retired. And then a less 0.5 of a classroom para. So that's Lake Pan. And you can see where they were down from staffing from last year, 57 students. So that's why you see the 2 cut. Webster, same process, just pointing out the differences. You can see that in February they had 603. I'm staffing at 602. There they had 31. It's 30.89 rounded down for to be on the safe side. And so they lost a class size because we always go back to the 1, except for in Bushville's case where we don't want to go over what they had last year. They lost a basic up here due to rounding, and they lost a resource, but it's being replaced by a district staff member who's that was in that you'll see later. So they'll have the person there. It's just going to be a different type of person. They're taking up an AP intern unit. So they're basically losing two people. And one of their resource individuals wanted to go back in the classroom, so it worked out well. And then again, we had another situation where a lab manager is retiring at the end of the school year. And then we looked at numbers, and Bushville Elementary School and Wildwood Elementary School have 727 students, and they have a teacher and 3 PE aides. I don't know how this got by us the last couple of years, but this school's down to 602. And so we were able to move or take out one of the PE paras in this case, because they have like almost 130 less kids. Wildwood Elementary School, same process. February they had 723. They're being staffed at 727. And I don't know if you heard me or not, but Bushville and Wildwood Elementary School both have the same staffing number, 727, which we've never had that before, 2 schools having the same number. You received the initial email of the packet in the board packet, and then I sent you some new pages today. What you're seeing on my screen is the updated pages. So if you look at something that's not quite right, this is the updated pages. Wildwood Elementary School is down to the 35, so there's 2 basic units right there. Last year we contracted for 1 individual to do behavior. We took that unit out, and they still have their 2 resource teachers like the other 2 schools, and so they lost 2 basic and they lost the contracted person. So they're down 3, 2 classroom and 1 outside the classroom. And you can see that they're down 44 students. So 44 divided by 22 is 2. So that's where the numbers come from. In the support area, we do have a change here. We have on the ESE line, we used to have one interpreter. We had to add a second interpreter. We have 2 kids in kindergarten that need interpreters, but they're not on the same schedule. One has OT and PT and is out in inclusion. The one is self-contained. So one interpreter could not do it. So we've had to add a second one. And then there was the less a 0.5 classroom aid. So that is the difference. That's Wildwood Elementary School. Any questions on the elementary schools?
No.
South Sumter Middle, a little bit shorter process, but the same thing. You take the 6 through 8, you know, by the average. We take out the self-contained ESE. We multiply by the 7 periods. We divide by the 22. And then we divide by 6 periods because teachers teach 6 periods and they have 1 period off. If you look, February was 841. The staffing plan is 842. It shows a decrease of 2 in the basic land. The below all stays the same. So all they lost was 2 basic, which is not all they lost. That sounds terrible, but because every teacher is definitely important. So I don't mean to sound nonchalant about that. Miss Dustin got with me today. And the reason why you had the change today, usually you don't see this document until the workshop day. I usually hand it out that day, and I'm usually making copies of that day. But because of the way we were doing our meetings, we try to get it out to you a little earlier. And so changes have happened in this last week and a half. So that's why there were some updates. And so there was an ESE para that Ms. Dustin removed from there. And for ESOL in the formula, you have to have 15 of the same language. Last year, this para was shared between South Sumter Middle and South Sumter High School, and neither school had that magic number. And so the grant funding for that para will not support it. So it is on hold. There is possible that when, you know, kids enroll and we have some more ESOL children that we could add that back, but it's on hold. And this up in the ESE land as well, we had a student that had American Sign Language individual. That child no longer needs that because he's not going to be able to do it. And if you needed details on that, Ms. Dustin could explain that to you, but the mother, through an IEP process, they determined that those services are no longer needed. And so that's why that piece is gone. So that is South Sumter Middle School, and you can see down 43, down 2, about the same thing. South Sumter High School, if you look, and the secondary schools are different because if you look at October and February, October for South Sumter High School, you see the 1062. And February, they dropped down to 1033. We see this at our 2 high schools, that there's always a decrease in February. Kids move, kids drop out, they go to adult ed, they might graduate in December, whatever the case may be. But there's always this drop. And so the roll up is 1108, but the staffing plan is 1063. Which, if you look at October, it's right there at 1062. So I feel good about that number with South Sumter High School. Now they're at 46.4, so their top units stay the same. 0.4, it was not a round up, it was a round down anyway, so I didn't have to feel like I was taking something away. And then if we look down at the bottom half, what we've had, I showed you in the formulas where we were using the state average for guidance counselors. And when you do the calculation, it comes out to like 2.2. And so we have, they had basically 3 counselors. They had 1 counselor that was funded partially out of Title ESE funding. And that counselor worked on ESE and on was an ESE counselor, and then they had 2 regular ed. All we're saying is that that's the funding part that we removed. So there is, we have reduced that based on the state average down to 2 guidance counselors. So this is the half and the half, but it's not being used for ESE, and so we have reduced that counselor, and it's just reduce of a counselor, and so that's the only change there for that school. Now up on their support side, they lost, and in fact this is supposed to be 3+2. I apologize for that. That's my mistake, because that was a change today. That one of their students had aged out, and that student had a one-on-one aide. So that ESE para is not needed at this school, but I do believe will be needed someplace else. So that's South Sumter High School. And Wildwood Middle High, it's very much the same process. You have a middle school representation, and then you have the traditional high school representation, and I add them together. This is the one I recalculated about 10 times because of the growth that it has showed. And if you look at October for South Sumter or Wildwood Middle High School, they had 765, and they did grow, which was kind of the opposite of South Sumter High School. They grew to 805, but our formula is saying they're going to be 893. That's a big jump, and because their roll up is only 845. So this one makes me nervous. So we have put some our units on hold to where if those numbers actually show up, then we will definitely put them there, but it's a little scary. And I hope they are. That would be awesome for that school. But we just don't know. So this looks odd because it looks like we added 7 basic, which we did. They earned 7 basic based on the numbers that I'm worried about. We took off a 0.5 reading and a 0.5 resource, and less 1 virtual, less 1 staffing. Mr. Peters retired, so that was no individual. He's gone. And so we have these 4 class size on hold, and we're going to be working with schools on enrollment and looking at their schedules, and the kids show up or look like they're going to show up, then we'll definitely look at releasing these units. But that's just a scary jump for that many units for one school. And so we did not take it with there. We got them the same as last year in the total units.
If that's a big jump like that, are there rooms at the school to house them?
I'm not sure.
Use the middle school some again, or?
I don't know. We'd have to get with Mr. Graybill and look at that, or we'd have to move in portables.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that after after tonight
We'll
that we can
see them
talk
after you
to
see
them
them, right?
and look at it. The only thing I changed up here is that they had 2 choices, which was 2 like in-school suspension individuals, trying to be again proactive in looking at things. That we took one of those away, but they still have 1. So that is Wildwood Middle High School. I know that this looks odd, but I added 7. I've never added 7 units to any school. So it really, and I don't know, I just can't explain why that is. And like I said, and I've redone the calculations I showed you on where it showed like a 2% growth and an 8% growth, which ended up being like a 5% growth. And so that's where, it calculates out, but we'll see. The only change is Sumter Prep. I took off a 0.5 reading support, and this virtual teacher is not gone. It's just going to be changing sites. So there's really no change to his teacher list. We're just going to put that person on the district page, that you'll see that in just a minute. And he fluctuates. You can see we always kind of keep it around 100. In October, they had 97, and in February, they had 102. So we try to stay right at 100. This is our employment specialist who works with our ESE kids to try to work with getting jobs and either on campus or off campus. That's Brian Harrison. This is our clerks at the school. our guidance clerks, our data entry clerks. And then this is our district, our countywide, our behavioral specialists, our pre-K social worker, our early childhood, our other social worker, our EFE staffing specialist that staffed here, that was Miss Minute. We have a vision and a deaf, hard of hearing teacher. We have our psychologist. We have, and this is where I put the virtual guy. We have a direct support to schools. We have one behavior person that's different than Miss Ricker, and then we have the virtual teacher here. So we just moved him from Sumter Prep to the county page. That's all. And we have our we ended the year after everything with if you look, we had one reserve teacher unit. We're asking always again for the 12. We ended up using, I think, 6 of those last year. And there's our paras. We still had 3, and we asked for 7. These are our bus aides. It's actually 16 people, but they're like 4-hour folks. So it's 8 whole people, but just 16 individuals. So I wanted to show you the difference. We kind of end up, it looks like we're exactly the same, but the difference is we filled 409 slots last year with 1 reserve left, which made the 410. Here, I'm saying that we're going to fill 398 and we have 12 reserves. So I've cut 11 teacher units off of the staffing from this current year. Same thing with the paras. We filled 150. I say we're going to fill 142, which is a saving. And actually that 142 is really 141.5. It didn't show the decimal. So it's a savings of 8.5 units in the non-instructs. And this is page 19 is just a snapshot of every school where you can see the current and the new year and what the changes were. This is just a cut and paste from the other pages. Oh, there's 2 of them in there. Okay. This is food service. This is how it was allocated in 1920. Mr. Suber said there was to be no changes, so we're staying even on that. And then we have our district technology support for schools. It's staying the same. And then we have our custodial hours. There's actually a decrease of 3 hours based on when I plugged all those numbers in. This is how it calculated. So Miss Whitman will be working on that. And that is the end of that presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Moffitt. That's a lot of work.
Mrs. Moffett, Sally here. I would just like to say I liked getting this early. I mean, where you can look at it and you know what you're talking about versus getting it at the workshop and then trying to figure it all out, even with you explaining it.
Yeah, and I understand that is easier, but as long as you always know that things keep happening. So I was able to get it work. Marla helped me and able to get it in there real quick. Because I had pages marked up where you could see the old and the new, but she was able to get the new one in there. So that and things will change after today. I mean, that's the thing about this staffing formula. Every day, or at least once a week, it changes somehow because of students coming in or students going out. So as long as the understanding is that this is what you approved today, and it's fluid, and we try to stay within what you approved, the 410 and the 150, and we try never to go over that, but we have wiggle room in the middle with the reserves. So I will try to continue to do this for you, and just try to get the staff together. It was just kind of crazy doing it this way for the first time, but hopefully it worked.
Ms. Moffitt, do you want to talk about the dollars involved?
Well, I was going to let Miss Whitman go first, and then I'll talk about that at the end.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. Ms. Whitman, I think you're up.
Okay. I'll wait till Miss Moffitt gets hers off the screen there. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
There you are.
Okay, let's try this now. Okay, can you see that?
Not yet. It may take a second.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little delay, Lisa. It kind of makes you nervous before it pops up.
Okay, well, I'm seeing it on my side.
Ms. Moffett, the Sumter Adult and Community Ed, were you going to do that later too?
No, that's Miss
Go to the
Whitman.
next slide. Oh, Mr. Trix headed to see you, Lisa, Miss Whitman.
Okay.
You have to, when you hit the share button, Lisa, you have to go down and hit the box that pops up, the one that you want to share.
Yeah, that's what I thought I did. Let me try it again.
That's what I messed up on, so.
Okay, I'm doing the share button. Okay. Still not there? Ashley came over to help me, but I think this happened to us this afternoon as well. I can share. Mhm. And then is it this one? There you go. I'll see when you go down here. And then
Oh, something's happening.
okay. Click share again. Sorry, Dave, to make you run around here.
It's there now.
That's the wrong thing.
Okay. How about that?
It's your initials.
Oh, yay.
There you go.
Okay. Boy, I never saw Mr. Trick run so fast. Well, thanks, Miss Moffett. She does the heavy hitting on the staffing, and I just have the smaller pieces. So the first part here is on the administrators. Let me get it to us. So you can see the whole page there. Okay, on the administrators, these allocations mirror the previously approved organizational chart. And I think you all approved that last week. And it also mirrors the transitional plan that is in the board packet for tonight. Then on the other, you'll note that we've had that self-insurance benefits manager in there for the last few years. We've had it on hold, but just decided it's best to take it out this year. And then the network system analyst or other tech support, we were not able to find an analyst, but we did hire a lower paid position, a computer technician, that is reflected on the next page. I think we saved about $23,000 with just that one position. You'll also note the number of interns is the same as it was last year. However, we are holding one of those in reserve. Then the classified section stays the same except for the increase there with one more technician. And that was the computer technician in place of the network analyst. And then also we have a note at the bottom of this page. We have 2 retirements coming from the transportation department. Both Mr. Foote and Mr. Keeler will be retiring this year. And they're anticipating a reorganization of duties and such. And hopefully we will be able to take portions of those units and make it into one. So hopefully there'll be one less there. Then the next page. This is just our allocation of our part-time folks. We still have our part-time energy educator managers. And then we always have those 6 designees for shelter operations. Then the other page that I have for you, I didn't include here, but it's in your paperwork, and it's the allocations from Mr. Ferguson for the adult ed. And so he has requested 22 part-time teaching units, a part-time transition specialist, part-time career and assessment specialist, and 3 part-time workforce development teaching units. And I believe that's exactly the same as it was last year. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Okay, seeing none, is there anything else that we need to discuss in the workshop? Is there any public input? I have to ask, there's like 3 people out in front of me, but they're not.
Hey, Miss Norris, I have one little document to show
Okay.
you. It kind of
Okay.
sums everything up.
All right.
Well, hang on, let me share it the right way here. Maybe. Can you? Well, you can't see that. Oh, what am I doing? I know Dave showed us how to do this.
He doesn't have to run as far to your office.
I know, but I'm there. I'm there. Here I am. Woohoo! It's coming. There it is. Tell me when you see it. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is kind of a summary of our changes. The 11 teacher units, salary and benefits comes to like $623,700. The 8.5 non-instruct units, $238,000. The network analysts, the difference between the analyst and the tech is about $23,000. There's a transportation bus router that there's going to be some changes there. So that's about $20,000. And then Mr. Shirley's district reorganization, we've saved about a little over $4,000 for a total savings of our staffing of over $900,000.
Wow.
So that's all, everything that you've heard tonight comes up to that number. Because we're preparing for the funding cliff.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a savings.
Yeah. And, you know, depending upon who the actual person is, it'll jump a little bit here, a little bit there if you actually talk about exact people. But
Sure.
that's a very close estimate. So any questions about that?
Jennifer Boyette here, no questions, and we appreciate your frugalness and the thoroughness of the presentation.
Well, thank you. I know you appreciate it. Some schools are not going to, of course, because nobody wants to be cut units, and I understand that from being from a school perspective. So it's never easy. It's not something that we take pleasure in, by no means. But it is something that I think that has to be done at this time.
Thank you, Debbie. Absolutely. With not knowing what's going on, and we're a whole new environment, we'll have to wait and see. If we get them, then we can go from there. But it looks good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Staff, you guys did a great job as always. Very thorough, I thought. And board members, if you have any questions, please ask now. We've got about, looks like 35 minutes before we can start our board meeting. And so I suppose we just click off Teams and get back on at 5:30 if there are no questions or follow-up. Like I said, this is new to all of us. We'll go as slow and repeat as much as we need to repeat because we want to be sure that you thoroughly understand the material that's been presented today.
And all I need to close this out is a motion to adjourn by someone.
Sally will make a motion to adjourn.
Ms.
Kathy
Marsh,
Joyner will make a second.
second by Ms. Joyner. All those in favor?
Aye.
David Williams.
Sally
Aye,
Marsh,
Jennifer
aye.
Boyette.
Motion passes. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. See you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Norris. Good job chairing.
Yeah, I didn't do anything, did I? Okay. Thank you.
You
to
know,
all
to get into technology like a pro.
presenters. Thank you to our presenters.
$1,000.
Yeah.
You heard her.
Up here.
You listened to her presentation, right? All right, we're good.
have 20, 30 people end up in the hospital. So if they're all doing that, then I think that they need to be